So, you know that moment? You jump in a taxi, maybe you're tired from a flight, and then inevitably the small talk starts.
Oh, yeah. That little dance of finding something to say to a complete stranger. It happens all the time.
Right. Well, today, we're going to actually dissect one of those exact moments, a real taxi conversation.
Yeah.
We're aiming to, pull back the curtain a bit on everyday chat and see what makes it tick.
Exactly. It's not just about retelling the story. We want to get into the nuts and bolts, the little phrases, the social stuff that makes conversation flow, or sometimes not flow so well.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got the perfect material, a transcript, between a driver and a passenger. Our mission, really, is to figure out how this casual chat unfolds and grab some useful language bits for, polite, engaging small talk, stuff you can actually use.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Chapter 1, setting the scene. So it kicks off pretty standard. Driver says, "Where to, miss?"
Yep.
Passenger gives the destination. Crenshaw and Hawthorne at the Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
Easy enough. But then the driver goes, "So where are you flying in from?"
And that question, simple as it sounds, it's a really common icebreaker, isn't it? Especially at an airport pickup.
Yeah, definitely.
Travel is something most people can relate to, so asking about where someone's come from, it's kind of a low-risk way to start a conversation. See if there's a connection.
Right. And her answer is interesting, too. She says, "From China, really." That little "really" on the end.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like she's a bit surprised, maybe, or just knows it might sound unexpected.
Yeah, it adds a little something, and it clearly catches the driver's attention because his very next line is, "You don't look very Chinese to me, if you don't mind me saying so."
Okay.
Lot to unpack there.
There really is. First, that observation itself, "You don't look very Chinese to me."
Yeah.
I mean, that's purely based on his visual impression, right?
Right.
And maybe some preconceived ideas or stereotypes about appearance.
Absolutely. It's a comment that's definitely walking a fine line, could easily make things awkward.
Which makes that last bit, "if you don't mind me saying so," so important. What's the function of that phrase?
Well, that's a classic politeness strategy. A hedging device, linguists call it. He's basically flagging that he knows his comment could be sensitive, maybe even a bit intrusive or based on an assumption.
So he's trying to soften it.
Exactly. He's showing awareness, trying to be considerate, even while making this potentially awkward observation about her looks. It's like saying, "I know this might be stepping over a line, but here's what I noticed."
And how does she handle it? Pretty smoothly, actually.
Very. She just says, "It's fine. I am actually from Mexico." Simple, direct correction, no drama.
And then she adds more detail, which is smart. "I was in China on a business trip visiting some local companies that manufacture bathroom products."
Right. So she clarifies her nationality and gives a reason for being in China. That extra context just smooths everything over, redirects the conversation away from the potentially awkward comment about appearance, and gives the driver something else to talk about, like her business trip.
Okay, so that leads us nicely into Chapter 2. Things get, a little more personal. The driver first says, "Wow, sounds interesting." Shows he's listening right.
Yeah, simple positive feedback. Keeps the conversation alive.
But then he asks, "Excuse me if I'm being a bit nosy, but how old are you?" Whoa. Okay, let's talk about nosy.
Yeah, nosy. He's literally labeling his own question. He's saying, "I know this is probably prying too much into your personal business, but..."
So he knows it's maybe not the most appropriate question.
He definitely shows some awareness, yeah. Asking someone's age, especially a woman you barely know, in many cultures, that's considered pretty personal, even rude.
For sure.
So that phrase, "excuse me if I'm being a bit nosy," is another attempt to soften the blow, just like, "if you don't mind me saying so."
Yeah.
He's acknowledging the social rule he might be breaking.
It's interesting how we use language to try and get away with these slightly intrusive questions, isn't it?
It really is. And her response is brilliant, I think. She just laughs, "Huh, don't you know it's rude to ask a lady her age?"
The laugh is key there, right?
Yeah.
Keeps it light.
Totally. It diffuses any awkwardness. She points out the social faux pas directly, but in a really gentle, playful way, sets a boundary without making him feel terrible.
Very skillful. And then the driver quickly tries to explain himself. He says, "Don't get me wrong, it's just that you seem so young and already doing business overseas." Another useful phrase, "don't get me wrong."
Ah, yes, don't get me wrong. That's all about clarifying intent. He's saying, hold on, don't misunderstand why I asked that potentially rude question.
Right, my motive wasn't just to be nosy.
Exactly. Here's the real reason. In this case, he's trying to reframe it. He's suggesting his question came from a place of admiration, like he was impressed by her apparent youth and her international business activities. It's an attempt to make it sound like a compliment, essentially.
Okay, Chapter 3. Now we get into sharing information back and forth. So after his explanation, she responds quite politely. She says, well, thank you in that case. I am 26 years old.
Yeah, that little phrase, well, thank you in that case, is nice. It accepts his explanation, turning the awkward question into a kind of compliment before she actually gives him the answer. Smooths things over again.
And then, this is crucial for keeping the chat balanced, she asks. And what about yourself?
Yes, that is such a key phrase for reciprocity in small talk. You could say, and what about you? And it's grammatically fine, but and what about yourself? Just sounds, well, really natural and common in everyday spoken English.
It feels more polite somehow.
It does, yeah. It really signals, okay, I've shared something, now I'm interested in you. It turns the spotlight back.
Prevents it from feeling like an interview where one person just asks all the questions.
Exactly. That give and take is fundamental. You share a bit, you ask a bit back. It shows you're actually engaged with the other person, not just talking at them. Builds that little connection.
So the driver answers her question. He says, I'm 40 years old and was born and raised here in the good old USA.
Okay, born and raised here. Pretty standard way to say you've lived somewhere your whole life. Gives that sense of being local. And the good old USA, that's a very common, informal, often kind of affectionate or nostalgic way people refer to the U.S. You hear it a lot.
Right. But then he adds another layer. Although I have some Colombian heritage.
Ooh, interesting detail. Heritage, meaning his family background, his roots. That opens up a whole new potential topic, doesn't it? Adds a bit more depth to who he is beyond just being a taxi driver from the U.S.
Absolutely. Even in a short chat, these little reveals can happen.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Chapter 4. Finding that common ground. How does the passenger react to the Colombian heritage part?
She jumps right on it, enthusiastically, really. That's great.
That positive reaction is important, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. It encourages him, shows she's genuinely interested in that specific piece of information, keeps the energy up.
And our next question follows perfectly logically. Do you speak Spanish?
Yeah. Super relevant follow-up. Given the Colombian heritage, it's the natural next thing to ask. It shows she's listening carefully and actively looking for a possible connection point. In this case, language.
And his answer?
Pretty casual. Yeah, of course. The is just a little pause filler.
Standard thinking noise.
Yeah. But of course, suggests that for him, speaking Spanish is kind of expected, almost obvious because of his background.
So this whole little exchange, it really shows that process of finding common ground in action.
It really does. She heard a detailed Colombian heritage and explored it further by asking about language. It's how connections get made, even brief ones.
And you can just trace the flow, can't you? From where you're going to talking about China, then appearance, then age, then background, and finally language. One thing just led naturally to the next.
Exactly. This snippet, short as it is, it shows all those key ingredients of decent small talk. Starting the chat, sharing little bits of info, using those politeness phrases we talked about, showing interest back, and actively trying to find something you both connect on.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into this everyday taxi chat, what are the main takeaways? The really practical bits?
Well, I think those politeness phrases are super useful. Knowing when to use things like, if you don't mind me saying so, or excuse me if I'm being a bit nosy, or don't get me wrong, they help navigate those potentially tricky social moments.
Right, they're like little conversational tools.
They really are. And then the big one for keeping things balanced, that reciprocal question. Remembering to ask, and what about yourself, or something similar. It just makes the conversation feel much more like a two-way street.
Yeah, absolutely. And encourages the other person to share too. These aren't just like theoretical ideas. You can actually try using these phrases in your own conversations. See how they work.
Precisely. And maybe the final thought here is just realizing how even these quick, seemingly insignificant interactions like chatting with a taxi driver can be surprisingly revealing. They show so much about how people connect, how they navigate social rules, and the subtle ways we use language to build or sometimes stumble over rapport. Makes you think about the quiet art of just talking to people, doesn't it?
Thanks for listening. And if you found a video helpful, please hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so you never miss an episode, and share it with others who might benefit. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. So your feedback is really important to us. And if you want to continue learning right now, here in this playlist, you'll find helpful videos for English listening practice. You might want to watch it next. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.